Disclaimer: Reggie and Royal's analysis and insights are based upon data gathered by it from various sources believed to be reliable, complete and accurate. However, no guarantee is made by Reggie and Royal, or Vision Associates LLC as to the reliability, completeness and accuracy of the information so analyzed. Reggie and Royal is in the business of gathering information, analyzing it and disseminating the analysis for informational and educational purposes only. Reggie and Royal attempts to analyze trends, not make recommendations. All statements and expressions are the opinion of Reggie and Royal and are not meant to be investment advice or solicitation or recommendation to establish market positions. Our opinions are subject to change without notice. Reggie and Royal strongly advises readers to conduct thorough research relevant to decisions and verify facts from various independent sources. Copyright 2021 Vision Associates LLC. All rights reserved.
All right, so imagine this, okay? Like a dog, right? But it has a dolphin fin, and it's somehow stuck up in a tree.
What?
Yeah, it sounds pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's how someone at like this big Bitcoin conference in 2021 described a cryptocurrency project.
Wow. Okay, I guess that kind of sets the tone for what we're getting into today then, huh?
Yeah, you got it. We're taking a deep dive into the world of cryptocurrency. You know, it can be kind of quirky, sometimes confusing, but always fascinating, right?
Definitely. And we've got a ton of material to cover. We're looking at interviews, conference talks, you name it. We've got Ray Dalio, Michael Saylor, Caitlin Long, and even a peek into that shitcoin conference.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's a good reminder that there's way more to crypto than just Bitcoin, right?
For sure.
So think of this deep dive as like a curated crash course, okay? Whether you're already like super into DeFi and all that, or just trying to figure out what a blockchain even is, this one's for you.
Exactly. We're highlighting like the key trends and debates, and maybe even busting a few myths along the way.
Okay, so speaking of trends, one of our sources said something really interesting, okay? They described cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin specifically, as the 7th layer of technological evolution.
7th layer?
Yeah, like, you know, we had mainframes, then PCs came along, then the internet, mobile devices, and now crypto. It's like each layer builds on the one before it.
I kind of see it. Each of those technologies kind of revolutionized how we live and work. And crypto, with its whole decentralized, trustless system, yeah, it kind of fits as the next step.
Right. It's compelling. And here's another thing to think about, okay? Bitcoin itself, still basically in beta, like version 0.21.1.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's early stage.
So when we hear people criticizing like its limitations or whatever, it's important to remember that it's still developing. It's got a long way to go.
It's like judging a video game that's still in early access. You got to have some perspective.
Totally. And you can definitely see that in how people view Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the opinions are all over the place.
I mean, some experts are calling it the mother of all bubbles. And then you have others, they're saying it's like the most perfect money we've ever had.
It's wild.
Definitely. And that's a core question, isn't it? Is Bitcoin mainly a store of value, like digital gold? Or is it more like a medium of exchange, a way to buy stuff?
Yeah. I mean, you've got that whole Otoedial mentality, right? Hold on for dear life. It seems like a lot of people are treating it as a long-term investment.
Yeah, but that kind of clashes with the idea of it being a currency, right?
Exactly. If everybody's just like hoarding Bitcoin, waiting for it to go up in value, how's it ever going to be used to, you know, buy a cup of coffee or whatever?
It's a good point. If cryptocurrency is really going to change how we use money, we need mass adoption. And that might be where stable coins and those other digital currencies come into play, you know? Stable
coins. Okay, so those are pegged to a fiat currency, like the US dollar, so they don't have that same volatility as Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Like Tether, right? One of the biggest stable coins.
Yep. Tether is designed to always be worth $1 US.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Although there's been, you know, some controversy around Tether's reserves. Like, are they actually fully backed by real dollars?
Yeah, there are some concerns there, for sure.
But, okay, I see the point. The idea with stablecoins is to make digital currencies more, I don't know, practical for everyday use.
Yeah, exactly, for like buying groceries and stuff.
Right, makes sense. And then we've got these big institutions like getting into Bitcoin now. One expert described it as like penguins slowly waddling to the water.
Ah!
Once one jumps in,
The rest follow.
Right.
It's a great analogy for what we're seeing, though, right?
It is. Like, you've got MicroStrategy, they're going all in on Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and even some governments, like El Salvador, they made it legal tender.
It's a pretty big deal.
It is. It's crazy to think how much things have changed. Like, remember back in 2017 when Ray Dalio was super skeptical about Bitcoin?
Yeah, he was worried about the volatility.
Right, and whether governments would try to shut it down.
He also said that, like, not enough people were using it, for it to really be successful.
Yeah, she had a point. But then, like, by 2020, he was starting to see Bitcoin as kind of similar to gold,
Yeah, like a hedge against inflation.
Exactly. And then just a year later, he was more worried about the U.S. dollar losing value. And he even thought Bitcoin could be like a savings vehicle.
That's a pretty big shift. It seems like he realized that Bitcoin could be a good way to protect your money in a world where things are getting more and more uncertain, economically speaking.
Yeah. So you can see how even someone like Ray Dalio, who was initially totally against Bitcoin, is starting to come around.
It's interesting. I mean, he's kind of a big deal in the finance world.
He is, and his changing views kind of show how the perception of cryptocurrency is shifting, even among those, Wall Street types.
It definitely makes you think, like how much will this space change in the next few years?
I know, right? And while Dalio's coming around to Bitcoin, there are other folks who are already exploring, like, the whole crypto universe.
Yeah.
Like Michael Saylor. He's got this whole breakdown where he divides it into three main parts, right?
Yeah, he talks about digital property, digital currency, and digital applications.
Okay, so let's break it down. All right. Digital property. Is that basically just Bitcoin?
Pretty much.
And I remember he said something about Bitcoin being like the granite blocks of cyber Manhattan, right?
Yeah, he did.
It was a pretty vivid image.
It is. And I think it captures his point well. He sees Bitcoin as this foundational thing, like a store of value for the whole digital economy.
Makes sense. So it's like durable, scarce, and hard to manipulate, just like, granite.
Exactly.
Okay, so digital property, Bitcoin. Got it. And then digital currency, that's where we get into stable coins, right? Like Tether.
Yeah.
And those central bank digital currencies.
Yep. Those are the CBDCs.
UDCs, yeah.
And those are supposed to give us that stability and ease of use that we're used to with, regular money.
Okay, so more like digital cash, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So less volatility, because they're pegged to a real currency like the dollar.
Right, so it's all about practicality with stablecoins then. What about that third category, the digital applications?
Ah, so that's where Ethereum comes in.
Ethereum.
Yeah, because Ethereum has the potential to really disrupt the financial world.
Okay, how so?
Well, you can build decentralized applications on it or, dApps. And these dApps, they can offer all sorts of financial services. Think of like lending, borrowing, maybe even insurance.
Whoa, so basically cutting out the middleman entirely, huh?
That's the idea. No banks, no brokers, just code.
It sounds kind of radical, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's definitely shaking things up.
Can you give me like a concrete example of what one of these dApps would look like?
Sure. Okay. Imagine this. There's a platform where you can borrow cryptocurrency, right?
Okay.
But you use your existing crypto holdings as collateral. And the whole thing is managed by a smart contract. So no bank is involved at all.
Huh. So it's like peer-to-peer lending, but with like algorithms.
Pretty much. And it's all more transparent. And potentially, much cheaper than going through a bank.
Interesting. And that's just one example of what this whole DeFi thing can do, right?
Right. Decentralized finance.
DeFi. Man, I've been hearing that term everywhere lately.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
So we've got Bitcoin as this like foundational digital property, stable coins for everyday transactions, and then Ethereum and DeFi for, reinventing the financial system. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, for sure. And Saylor believes that all three of these things, they'll all exist together and they'll all play a role as the space grows.
Okay, that makes sense. But speaking of, the space growing, there's one big thing we haven't really touched on, Ray.
What's that?
Regulation. It's like the elephant in the room, right? I mean, right now it's still the Wild West out there, but it seems like things are starting to, take shape.
Yeah, it's inevitable, right? I mean, Caitlin Long, she's a big name in the blockchain world.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Well, she argues that we're going to see a lot more regulation coming, but it's not about, like, banning crypto. It's more about making sure it doesn't, like, destabilize the whole financial system.
Okay, so, like, guardrails rather than a shutdown.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. I think one of the big things regulators are worried about is stable coins, right? Like making sure they're actually backed by real money.
Yeah, that's a big one. Because if those stable coins aren't really stable, well, that could have a ripple effect on the whole economy.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a
Yeah.
scary thought. So, where do you think this regulatory oversight is going to come from? Like, is it going to be federal agencies or?
Well, Caitlin Long, she thinks that a lot of the innovation when it comes to regulation is going to come from like individual states,
Right, interesting.
Yeah, like Wyoming, for example. They've been really proactive about embracing blockchain technology.
Right. So maybe we'll see a state-by-state approach then, at least, at first. I wonder if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, though, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Because it could lead to like a patchwork of different rules, right? And that might make it harder for the whole industry to grow.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. But, on the flip side, it could also encourage like experimentation and competition. States could be competing to attract crypto businesses.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe this is like a way to figure out what works best, like which regulatory models are the most effective.
Interesting. So it's like a real-world laboratory for crypto regulation then.
Yeah, I guess you could see it that way.
Okay, so we've talked about regulation, but what about adoption? I mean, the Gemini State of Crypto report showed that crypto ownership like doubled in 2021.
Yeah, and a lot of that growth came from Latin America and Asia.
So what's driving that? Why are so many people, especially in those regions, getting into crypto?
Well, I think there are a few things going on. Like first, as regulation increases and security gets better, crypto is becoming more mainstream.
Right, it's starting to feel less like risky or sketchy.
Exactly. It's becoming more of a legitimate asset class.
Right. And then you got to think about like the economic situation in some of these countries.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you've got economic instability or your currency is losing value quickly, people are going to look for alternatives.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like in those situations, crypto can be a way to, protect your wealth.
Right.
Or even just transact without having to rely on a, potentially unstable financial system.
Exactly. So in those places, crypto can be more than just an investment. It can be a necessity.
Right.
Yeah.
But even with all that, I mean, there are still some pretty big barriers to like mass adoption, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like I think one of the biggest ones is just a lack of education.
Totally. A lot of people still don't understand how cryptocurrency works, and they're intimidated by the technology.
It can be pretty confusing, especially with all the jargon.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like learning a whole new language sometimes.
Right. And then, of course, there's still a lot of regulatory uncertainty in different parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. We need clear guidelines if we want individuals and institutions to feel comfortable getting into crypto.
Right. So it seems like education and regulation, those are the two big keys to mass adoption. But it's also about changing perceptions, right?
Definitely. We need to move away from the idea that crypto is just for, tech nerds or speculators.
Right. Like it's for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay. And speaking of changing perceptions, we should talk about, the other side of the crypto world, like the stuff that goes beyond Bitcoin. Because we haven't really talked about that yet.
Right. And that's one of the things that the Shitcoin 2021 conference was all about, It was a deliberate pushback against that whole Bitcoin maximalism thing.
Ah, okay. So they were trying to be more inclusive.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to showcase like the full range of projects and ideas that are out there.
So like all the cool stuff happening beyond just Bitcoin.
Exactly. And we're starting to see that reflected in the real world,
Yeah.
Like El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender. That was a huge symbolic step.
Yeah, it was.
But there are other signs of adoption, too, like things that are maybe a little more under the radar.
Okay, like what?
Well, FTX, the crypto exchange, bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat's arena, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now it's the FTX arena.
Right.
And that's a pretty big deal, right? It's bringing crypto into the mainstream sports world.
Definitely. And Miami, the city itself, I mean, they're talking about accepting cryptocurrency for like tax payments and maybe even paying city employees in crypto.
Yeah, it's wild, right?
It is. I mean, just a few years ago, nobody would have imagined something like that happening.
I know, right? It's moving fast.
But it is. And it seems like, with all these developments, crypto is really becoming, less theoretical and more tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming a part of our everyday lives.
Right. But we should probably talk about, the downsides too. Like, what about the environmental impact of all this? Like the energy it takes to mine cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one, especially with Bitcoin.
Right. That's been getting a lot of attention lately.
And for good reason. It's a serious concern.
It seems like, a lot of investors are starting to factor that in now too.
Definitely. It's not just about the potential profits anymore, it's also about the ethical implications.
Yeah. Like, is this technology sustainable?
Exactly. And that's where those ESG mandates come in.
BSG.
Yeah, environmental, social, and governance factors.
Right.
Those are becoming really important for a lot of investors these days.
So they're not just looking at, like, the financial returns anymore. They're also considering, like, the environmental impact.
Yeah. It's about responsible investing.
Okay. So can you explain, like, what those ESG mandates are exactly?
Sure. It's basically a set of criteria that investors use to, evaluate a company or an investment. They're looking at things like, how sustainable the business is or how ethical their practices are.
Okay. So it's like a way to measure, whether a company is doing things the right way.
Exactly. And Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank,
Oh, yeah.
he's been talking about this a lot.
As you saying.
Well, he sees a growing demand for, ethically sourced Bitcoin, like Bitcoin that was mined using renewable energy.
Oh, wow.
And he even points to, what he calls the Norway model, where, miners are setting up their operations near hydroelectric dams.
Smart. So they're using clean energy.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like the crypto industry is really starting to take sustainability seriously.
I mean, it kind of has to, right? If it wants to be, a viable long-term thing.
Yeah, if the energy consumption gets out of control, it could undermine the whole system.
Right. It's good to see them taking steps in the right direction then. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, from Bitcoin to stable coins to Ethereum, DeFi, regulation, adoption, the environmental impact, like the whole 9 yards.
We have.
It's amazing how much is happening in this space.
It is. And it makes you wonder, what's next?
Yeah, what is next? Like, if this is the 7th layer of technological evolution, what does the 8th layer look like?
That's the big question, isn't it? What new innovations are going to come out of this? What challenges are we going to face? How is this going to change the world?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. But it's exciting, right?
It is.
Because the future isn't something that just happens to us, We
Right.
create it through our choices, our actions.
Right.
So we need to stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged, because the possibilities are,
Limitless.
Exactly.
Limitless.
It's a lot to think about, but it's definitely exciting. We're right on the edge of something huge.
It really does feel that way, doesn't it? But I think we got to be careful, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We need to be, enthusiastic about the potential for sure, but also, skeptical, question things, look at it from different angles.
Right. So be excited, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Exactly. Think for yourself. And that's super important, I think, especially when it comes to, all this talk about regulation.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it seems like regulation is inevitable at this point.
It is, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
You're right. Earlier, we were talking about, maybe a state-by-state approach, right, with Wyoming and all that. I'm still kind of, back and forth on whether that's actually good or not.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, it could create, a mess of different rules all over the place, which might actually stifle the industry, right?
Right. That's what I'm worried about.
But then again, you could also see it as, a way to encourage innovation, different states trying different things, seeing what works.
Yeah, it's like a competition.
Right, exactly. A competition to be, the most crypto-friendly state.
And maybe through that process, we figure out, the best way to regulate this whole thing.
Exactly. So it could be a good thing in the long run.
I hope so.
Right.
But, that's why education and engagement were so important, right?
Absolutely.
We need to understand this stuff, the technology, the risks, the policy choices. We can't just, sit back and let it happen.
Totally. We all have a stake in this. It's not just about the people who are already investing in crypto. It's going to affect everyone eventually.
Yeah, you're right. It's a big deal. And, one thing that I've been thinking about throughout this whole deep dive is this tension between decentralization and regulation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because crypto is all about, giving power back to individuals, right?
Yeah.
Taking it away from big institutions, governments, banks.
Right.
But then we're also talking about the need for, rules, oversight, regulation. It seems kind of contradictory,
It does, doesn't it? But I think it reflects a bigger question that we're grappling with, as a society. How do we balance individual freedom with, the need for some kind of order?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. And it's something that we're going to have to keep figuring out as crypto evolves.
And it's not just about, the government regulating things.
Right.
It's also about personal responsibility.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
In a decentralized system, everyone has more power, but that also means everyone has more responsibility.
Exactly. You can't just rely on someone else to like protect you. You got to do your own research, make your own decisions, and understand the risks.
Yeah, there's no safety net.
Nope.
Okay, so, we've talked about a lot of different aspects of crypto, but like, why does any of this matter? Why should people care? I mean, it's obviously more than just like the technology or the potential to make money.
Right. Way more than that.
Because you were saying earlier, like, it's about rethinking some pretty fundamental stuff, like how we organize ourselves as a society, how we create and exchange value, how we distribute power. That's pretty big, you know?
It is big because like this technology, it has the potential to change everything, like challenge the way things are, create systems that are more fair, more transparent, and, give individuals more power.
It's not just about the code then. It's about the ideas behind it,
Yeah.
the values.
Exactly. And we're already seeing the impact, like with DeFi and in developing countries where people are using crypto to like get access to financial services that they never had before.
Right.
This is real. It's happening now. And to ignore it is to, risk being left behind as the world changes.
It's not just about FOMO then. It's about understanding a force that's already shaping the future.
Exactly. Even if you're not like personally invested in crypto right now, you need to be paying attention. You need to understand what's going on.
Because it's not going away.
Nope. This is a fundamental shift in how we think about money, about value, about trust.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What does the future hold? We keep talking about this 7th layer. What about the 8th?
Well, that's the exciting part, right? We don't know.
Okay.
Nobody knows.
Right.
But the future isn't something that just happens, We build it through our choices, our actions.
So we need to be intentional about it.
We do. Stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
Words to live by. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. I feel like I've learned a ton. Thanks for guiding us through it.
It's been my pleasure. And hey, this is just the start, The conversation continues.
Yeah, that does.
We all have a role to play in shaping the future of crypto. So let's keep talking, let's keep learning, let's keep building.